Hi! There was a study done earlier this year. It suggests that while atheists and theists typically share moral values regarding protecting the vulnerable, liberty versus oppression, believing in claims when they are evidence-based, and being skeptical of claims when they are not backed by evidence, atheists are less likely to endorse values that promote group cohesion and are more likely to judge the morality of any given action by its consequence. The study goes on to say that in many countries, widespread cultural beliefs hold that atheists lack a moral compass. 2 surveys were conducted examining the moral values of 429 atheists and theists in the US. 2 larger surveys were also conducted involving 4,129 American atheists and theists, the US being a predominantly religious country, and Sweden, a predominantly irreligious country. And the results give clues as to why atheists and theists' moral compasses may be calibrated differently. The distinctions may stem in part from a theist's increased exposure to community engagement, belief-based behaviors that would be costly if the beliefs were false, and levels of perceived existential threat. The studies were conducted by a man called Thomas Stahl, who also said, "The most general take-home message from these studies is that people who do not believe in God do have a moral compass. In fact, they share many of the same moral concerns that religious believers have, such as concerns about fairness and about protecting vulnerable individuals from harm. However, disbelievers are less inclined than believers to endorse moral values that serve group cohesion, such as having respect for authorities, in-group loyalty, and sanctity. It is possible that the negative stereotype of atheists as immoral may stem in part from the fact that they are less inclined than religious people to view respect for authority, in-group loyalty, and sanctity as relevant for morality, and they are more likely to make moral judgments about harm on a consequentialist, case-by-case basis." I'll leave a link to the full article in the description box below, which is also where you'll find links to my Patreon and merchandise if you want to support me financially. Thank you, please. Let's get some clarity. There's this misconception that theists, particularly Christian theists, believe that atheists are immoral or amoral or necessarily less moral because they do not believe that God exists. However, even Gentiles who do not have God's written law show that they know his law when they instinctively obey it, even without having heard it. They demonstrate that God's law is written in their hearts, for their own conscience and thoughts either accuse them or tell them they are doing right. The picture here is of an unredeemed people, the Gentile world in general, who are without the law of Moses. And the comment is that via their conscience, or by virtue of being made in the image of God, they know instinctively good from bad, at least basically. So you can be moral or make good decisions or practice good behaviors without belief in God. But you cannot have objective morality if God does not exist. Without that transcendent anchor point, we cannot secure the objectivity of moral values and duties. Yet, it seems to be the case that objective moral values and duties do indeed exist, that they are as real to us as the existence of the external world. We so far have no compelling reason to think otherwise. And I think that this tells us that God exists, and that is basically the moral argument. It goes like this. Premise 1. if God does not exist, objective moral values and duties do not exist. Premise 2. Objective moral values and duties exist. Conclusion. God exists. To avoid this conclusion, the atheist has to refute at least one of the premises. And by stating that objective moral values and duties don't exist, atheists affirm that there's nothing really wrong with the transatlantic slave trade and all of the abominations that went on during that period of time, nor with Hitler's Holocaust. Some atheists, like Sam Harris, attempt to logically ground objective morality in the science of human flourishing, stating whatever advances the flourishing of humanity is objectively good, and whatever hinders human flourishing is objectively bad. Does human flourishing ground morality? Well, first of all, atheism, or science, cannot explain why. Why is the flourishing of humanity objectively good? And what does it even mean? What does it look like for humans to flourish? If we derive our ideas of human flourishing from our own subjective ideas, what constitutes human flourishing? What constitutes that objective good? What if one person or a group of people rose to power and over time decided and convinced others that in order for humanity to flourish, we must rid humanity of, say, disabled people, physically handicapped people, or mentally handicapped people? Wouldn't be good, would it? But who's to say? All an atheist can securely do within their worldview is assume that it's good for humanity to flourish. Then they're stuck with working out the anchor point for what good is, for what flourishing looks like. And that anchor point will always be moving. It will always be relative and subjective without the existence of God. Christians don't have this problem. If God exists and He created humanity in His image, intentionally, with purpose, then it is objectively true that it is good for humans to flourish. Further, if Harris and atheists who agree with the view believe that free will is an illusion, then his views on objective morality are nonsensical. Bottom line, science cannot derive an ought from an is. Science cannot tell us anything about how we ought to conduct ourselves in the world ethically, morally. It's the wrong question. Can atheists be moral? Or some question or criticism to that effect. Of course they can. As a Christian, I don't argue that an atheist is less moral than I am, or is incapable of goodness and right behavior. So then, what is the right question? The right question is whether objective moral values and duties and truth can be grounded in the atheistic worldview. Can we justify why certain things are good and certain things are bad? And the answer is straight up no. We need that transcendent anchor point for moral values and duties and truths that are objective, values independent of human opinion. So, can atheism explain morality? No, atheism cannot explain morality. Atheists can be moral, they can do good things, they can practice good behaviors, but atheism cannot explain morality, and science cannot ground morality. It cannot give us an ought, a should do. And it's not that an atheist cannot have a happy or fulfilling life. It's that there's no explanation or objective meaning, value, purpose to life. Any meaning, value, or purpose a person finds is delusional. In naturalism, it's all just a cosmic fluke. You are a cosmic fluke. Molecules to man. Just a random mashup of stuff. And nothing we do makes sense or makes any difference. Subjective meaning is quite different from actual meaning. It seems to me that in a godless universe where morality and meaning are merely the result of a bioevolutionary coincidence, we have no reason to think that any sense of meaning or morality is valid or binding. That doesn't mean that we still can't have a sense of it. An atheist, a person who doesn't know or rejects God, they can still have a sense of meaning and morality, but there's no reason for them to think any of it is valid. There's no reason for them to think that any of it applies to anyone else other than themselves in their own subjective experience of life. It's all just happenstance. And, you know, most of us do have that sense of meaning and morality, and thank God for that. So, hallelujah! Get out of here!